You got it on?
Mm-hmm. Alright, I'm here with Patrick Ryan. He served in the Army in Korea. He achieved the rank of Specials third class. Today is May 28th, 2016. We're here in Lansing, Michigan. I'm his grandson, Timothy Zelke, and this interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress.
Sounds good.
Alright. So, tell me, why did you decide on joining the Army?
Well, at that time, the Korean War was just over, and I knew they were still drafting, so either I could wait and get drafted, or I could enlist. And I enlisted for an extra year with the promise that I could go to a engineering school at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, when I got done with my basic training. And I took my basic at in Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, and then I went to Fort Belvoir as the Army had promised me, and I went to drafting school there, and then later I had the opportunity, about 6 months later, to come back there and go to map compiling school. So these were courses that I took. They were 3 months each, and though I had to do other Army duty, I would go to school 8 hours a day. And it did benefit me because I ended up being a road technician for the state of Michigan for MDOT, Michigan Transportation Department. And I always felt that if I hadn't had this training, I probably wouldn't have had that job, which was my career and helped me raise a family and so on, and eventually get down to Tim Zelke.
All right.
All right.
What was basic training like?
Basic training was about what I expected. It is a lot of discipline. You're up at 6 and you're in bed at 10, and you're ready to go to bed because you work hard during the day. You go through training, all kinds of training, and basic training is learning how to fire a weapon, fire maybe a machine gun and different things, but M1 was the main weapon that each GI carried with them most of the time, and that was what you got rated on, and you could be a superior rating, excellent, or I forget. I was basically in about the middle, so it didn't matter too much, and I was a fairly decent shot. But they would show you how to throw a hand grenade, fire a machine gun, shoot a bazooka rocket, different things. You went through what they called an infiltration course, where you'd have barbed wire about a foot and a half above the ground, and you'd have to shimmy under that, and you kept your head down because we went through at night, and they used tracers, and they these tracers were red, would show up red at night, and you'd think they were just above your head when they were actually probably a couple feet. But just different things like that. You learned how to cross a swamp on a rope, pull from one way to one side or the other, over a river maybe, but it could be used in a swamp or over water, basically. But there were a lot of other things. You learned how to march. You learned how to say sir, yes sir, and no sir, and it was almost always yes sir. You know that. So they trained you, and some people would even call it brainwashing a little bit, but basically it was just learning discipline. And if you treated people right around you, whether they were officers or cavalry being the people that were teaching you how to be a soldier, and it's good training for anybody. I mentioned it a lot of times with other GIs that had gotten out and that I'd talked to, and majority agree that it wouldn't hurt anybody to go through that. You learn a lot about life, and you learn that you have to take a lot of crap sometimes, but but it's all worthwhile. And that's probably about it for basic. The second 8 weeks, that was for 8 weeks. When that's over, you think you conquered the world. Then you go into a second 8, and that's when I went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which is about 17 miles outside of Washington, D.C. And so I got into D.C. a lot of weekends and got to see many different things. I spent a lot of time at the Smithsonian Institute, which has a lot to do with our country, and you could spend days there. I spent a couple Sundays, especially Sunday afternoons, there, and you'd have the weekends off mainly, unless you had some type of duty. And it was an experience, and I learned a lot about drafting, about designing different things, and like on road design, why drainage is the big thing. Always your ditches and your grades, and you've always got to have water flow in the right way, and not standing still, and different things, and just different things. And then later from there I went on to Fort Ord, California, and I was assigned to a headquarters company, and which was good duty. Anytime you're in a headquarters company, why you get to you get some privileges that a line company wouldn't get. And so I worked as a draftsman there, and it was good duty. It was at Monterey, California, Fort Ord, and we'd go into Monterey a lot of times and go, just different places around California. It was all new to me, being from Michigan. I had never been out of the state hardly, and I enjoyed that. And then eventually I had a chance to go back to Fort Belvoir, and I went back for map compiling, and I spent three months there in the fall, I think, of 1958. And it was quite beneficial for me, and I went back, and at Fort Ord they didn't have a map compiling unit, but they did have up in San Francisco at the Presidio San Francisco, which was the headquarters for the Pacific Coast. And I got into a mapping outfit up there, and enjoyed that. I had a pass in my pocket. We'd go to San Francisco or across the Golden Gate Bridge over to Sausalito and San Rafael, and so you got to see a lot. There's a lot of dead time in the Army too. Maybe after chow at night, why you come back, and if it's towards the end of the month and you don't have much money left, you get paid once a month, and by the end of the month you're pretty well out and nothing to do, and you just lay around and talk, and that's probably the dead time each day, and especially towards the end of the month. So that part of the Army wasn't
kind of a drag,
that great.
Boring.
No, a little bit boring there, right? But all in all, why it was pretty good. And then from there, I was almost go TDY, which is temporary duty. I would have come back to the Presidio. I was going to go to Alaska with about 10 other fellows, mappers, and a warrant officer. We were going up there, and we were going to fly up and go to Anchorage, and it was going to be in the summer, so it would have been nice, and then come back on an aircraft carrier, which would have been kind of a neat little deal for me, probably, seeing I'd never been on one. And
what were you going to do up there in Alaska?
Pardon?
What were you going to do in Alaska?
In Alaska, we were going to. They had mapped Alaska with flight lines from airplanes, but there were cloud covers in some areas, and we were going up and pick them up, and they were going to refly those areas that had been the cameras wouldn't cover because of the clouds. They were above the clouds, so they were going to refly those. We were going to take and develop pictures from their flight lines and make 8x11 pictures, and we had horizontal and vertical elevations that we could, these 8x11 photographs, and you could stretch them out and then pin them to a certain point, so you would know just where those points were and the distance, so that you would get the photographs as accurate as you can. The center of the photograph is pretty accurate, but the outside edges, there's a lot of distortion. So by wetting them and stretching them this way and that way, and then pinning them, you would have pretty good horizontal control. And you could tell exactly the distance from one point to another. And even though I wasn't in the Second World War, I might look that old, but I'm not. Why they used those, and they even used them so, they mapped some of these freight trains that were going throughout Germany and France and Belgium and Poland, all these different countries, and you could tell from the springs on the freight cars just how heavy they were. So you know the ones that were carrying heavy ammunition and heavy
guns.
combat material of one sort or another, tanks, whatever. Those springs would be, of course, much cramped together. And from those flight lines, you could tell through 3D, you could get a pretty accurate estimate of what was on that train. And that's where your bombers would take off from England and so on, and Europe as we got further into Europe. And they would tell which ones to bomb, which ones had the ammunition, which ones had the heavy military equipment. So it was, when you look through these 3Ds, they're called stereoscopes, and you could set them up and you move two photographs together until they come into focus. And when they come into focus, you could see like a ditch that might be only a foot deep on that. Looking through that stereoscope, you'll see that it'll look like 3 or 4 foot deep. So you got to know what you're doing. But that's how much you could tell vertically just what is happening in the terrain. And it's all beneficial when you're in the service.
Did you use stereoscopes when you were in Korea?
I used, and not in Korea I didn't, because even though I was supposed to go to Korea, my MOS, which was a map compiler, I was supposed to go to Tokyo, Japan, but the whole ship was a combat mission, and we all went to Korea. There were 4,000 of us on there, and it didn't matter what you did, you went to Korea. And we.
All right. So what year was this when you took the ship to Korea?
I took the ship, I think it was in about March of 1957, and I left Korea, come home. I was there 13 months, a little longer. I came home in May, so actually it was about 14, I guess, till I got back to the United States.
So this was after the war, though?
This was all after the war, right. The war was over, and we were there just as a occupation force, kind of a backup force for the Korean military that was just really getting organized. Korea had been occupied by Japan for 29 years previous to WW2, and so they really didn't have much on their own going yet. Today, they're a great economy, and everything is modern. You have modern roads. Probably some of their roads are better than our roads right now. And but it took them a long time. But they are a democracy, and we still have a lot of troops stationed over there. And North Korea, of course,
military
Kim
state.
Jong-un, the head of North Korea, has always been a warmonger, and his son has taken over now, and he still has one of the biggest armies in the world. But we have a lot of nuclear weapons, and I think our troops are probably better trained and better prepared to help the South Korean army if necessary.
But
It's a lot different than when I was there.
In the 50s,
Yeah.
how was the North Korean army compared to South Korea and the U.S. forces? Were they a threat?
They were still a threat, yeah. But in fact, I was stationed about 20 miles from the DMZ, which was the border between North and South Korea. And if North Korean troops ever did come over that hill, why, we were supposed to just, it was a combat unit there, the 7th Infantry, but we were just attached to them, helping build things. And we would have hightailed it back towards Seoul immediately and got out of there because we weren't combat. At least that was the plan. You never know until something happens, how fast you have to react and what happens, but you always had a weapon very close to the hand and ready to fight if you was necessary. So.
What kind of duties did you have while you were over there? What kind of stuff did you do on a day-to-day basis?
I worked basically as in a drafting room, but at times you'd help anything that's necessary in the way of unloading timber and wood that 2x4s and 2x6s and so on and so forth. You're going to need to build things. We had a Quonset. We lived in a Quonset, but the Quonset was pretty bad. We used to take some tape from our drafting room and take it down and try to tape up some of the holes in wintertime so they'd cut off the draft coming in. And all you had was a potbelly stove, and if that went out, why, pretty cool conditions. And conditions were rough there. The Koreans at that time were a backward nation yet, and it didn't take long with our support. I'm talking about the United States of America's support and money to get them started, and they become a real good economy. They've done well, and it's a country to be proud of probably now. The same as I was entitled to 2 R&Rs. R&R is rest and recuperation, and what you would do is you fly from Kippo Air Base in Seoul to Tachikawa in Japan, and then you could go where you wanted, but most everybody I knew always went into Tokyo, and there were R&R hotels there that were very reasonable, and you had fantastic meals with silver on the table and tablecloths, and it was a lot nicer than eating out of a met kit in the rain in Korea, and so it was nice. It was nice to be able to see Tokyo, and it offered a lot. And I was extremely impressed at a couple of their department stores. They had escalators already, and here in Lansing, we had only gotten those maybe 10 years previous to that, and Japan had them too, so they were a pretty modernized country. So, and
you spent both your R&Rs in Japan?
I had 2. I spent the one in Japan. The second one, I was going to go to Hong Kong with a friend of mine. In fact, we'd already had orders cut, and at that time, the outfit that I was in, which was the 84th Headquarters Battalion, deactivated. In other words, the colors from that unit were brought back to the United States, and another unit was sent over with people that were in the United States to replace us. So they canceled, R&Rs were canceled even though we had them.
You said you saw Bob Hope when you were in Korea?
Yeah, I did. Each Christmas through that era, Bob Hope would come over and entertain the GIs at Christmas time. And I really hadn't planned on going to the show, or going to his show. But we were about 2 miles from a church, and I was a duty driver on Christmas Eve. And so Christmas morning I had to take the company commander, which was Captain Tanner, and take him over. I'm Catholic and he happened to be Catholic, so we both went to the chapel where there was a Cardinal Spellman from New York was there. It was quite an ordeal too, and I had mass. But anyhow, we were on our way back from that, and we came by where the USO was out, and that was the Red Cross nurses, and they had coffee and donuts out of a little chuck wagon kind of, and And Bob Hope's show was there on a little stage right next to it. And this officer asked me if I had any idea of seeing the show. I said, well, if I could get over there, I'd like to see it. It was Christmas, and Bob Hope, well, everybody would enjoy that. So he said, well, okay, he'd go on back, he'd walk back the rest of the way. It was about a mile back to our compound where we were stationed. And I went in and I got some coffee and I got a donut from the Red Cross. And I was looking, most of the troops were ready for the show. We're up on this high mountain, all on the side of the mountain, probably a couple of thousand. And then by the Red Cross wagon, there was a rope that roped off the stage where the Bob Hope show was going to perform. And so I happened to be going right by there with my coffee and donut, and Les Brown was playing at that time. He had a band and was pretty well known, and he was traveling with the Bob Hope show. And he said, let those GIs up. They had it roped off about 20 foot by about 40 foot from the stage. And you couldn't get any closer. And he says, let those guys right up the stage. So they dropped the rope right in front of me. I was basically maybe the third or fourth person to walk through there. Pretty soon everybody was cramming in to get in through there, and I lost about half a cup of coffee, and I had most of my donut squashed in my hand. And I got up and I ended up in the third row, which wasn't too bad. And I knelt down, and we had to stay down lower so the people behind us could see, but I was right there for the show, and I had my camera with me, and I took a lot of pictures. Bob Hope was there, and Les Brown and his band of renown is what they called themselves. And Jane Mansfield, if anybody had ever heard of her, she was quite a hot actress at that time and traveled with the show over there for us. And another girl by the name of Aaron O'Brien, and a fellow that dances on the Lawrence Welk show, a black fellow, and I can't remember his name. He was really good. And I've seen him on that show a number of times since I've been home. If I happen to be watching it on a Saturday night, I'll watch because of him. But they had a good show, and they were stopped and cut out certain parts or do another part over because they wanted to show the show when they got back to the United States. They always put that on TV. And so I really enjoyed that, and I took a lot of pictures, and I got back to my unit, and we sent them to Hawaii to get developed, and they came back and they turned out real good. And I don't know, maybe 6, 8